Public Bill, second reading.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Anti-Money Laundering, Combating the Financing of Terrorism and Countering Proliferation Financing Miscellaneous Provisions Bill number 3 of 2026 be read a second time.
Who's seconding? Yes, Mr. Bhagwan. Yes, thank you.
Madam Speaker, our financial services sector is at the heart of the Mauritian economy, contributing 12.4% of GDP, employing 20,000 highly skilled professionals directly and many more indirectly, generating 65% of corporate tax revenues and 34% of PAYE revenue. It's a source of pride, strength, and stability, enabling us to stand tall in the world. Our financial services system has not only proved an immense source of prosperity in the past, it is also fundamental to fulfilling our ambitions for the future. So I stand before the House to present this very important bill, which brings forward a fully comprehensive and forward-looking set of reforms to safeguard the strength, integrity, and resilience of our financial services. And this could not be more timely, more relevant, and more necessary. Reaffirming our financial standing, reinforcing our credibility, and reminding the world of our commitment to reform in the face of new incoming financial threats. Showing our commitment to combating money laundering, the financing of terrorism, and the financing of proliferation. Madam Speaker, the world is changing faster than any of us can imagine. Financial crime is evolving. It's becoming ever more sophisticated, technologically enabled, and cross-border. In such an environment, maintaining the status quo is not an option. We must continuously strengthen our legislative and institutional frameworks to remain ahead of emerging risk. Madam Speaker, at its simplest, this bill is about protecting Mauritius from dirty money and the harm it brings. Money laundering and the financing of terrorism may sound too technical and daunting to many, but these are not distant or abstract concepts. They are what allow crime, corruption, and illegal networks to survive and grow. When illicit money flows unchecked, it does not just affect banks and financial institutions, it distorts the whole economy, undermines honest businesses, and erodes trust in our institutions. For a country like Mauritius, whose strength lies in its reputation as a clean, well-regulated, and trusted financial center, this is not just a technical matter. It is a national priority. In an increasingly interconnected world, financial crime is evolving at an unprecedented pace. Illicit financial flows can move rapidly across borders. Criminal networks operate with growing sophistication, and new technologies are reshaping the risk landscape. Faced with this, no jurisdiction can afford complacency. It is therefore incumbent upon us to ensure that our legal and institutional framework remain robust, adaptive, and capable of responding effectively to emerging threats. Madam Speaker, the global standards in this domain are set by the Financial Action Task Force, whose recommendations continue to evolve in response to new risks. As part of its latest round of mutual evaluations, the FATF has introduced significant amendments, placing stronger emphasis on effectiveness, risk-based supervision, transparency, international cooperation, and critically, the integration of proliferation financing risk. These developments signal a clear shift. It is no longer sufficient to have laws in place we must demonstrate that they actually work in practice. Madam Speaker, Mauritius went on the FATF grey list in February 2020. Whilst we came out of the grey list in October 2021, I can say that it can leave lasting damage to our global reputation, so there is no place for complacency. Today, Mauritius stands as a jurisdiction of substance, fully aligned with international standards. We are compliant with 26 of the 40 FATF recommendations and largely compliant with the remaining 14. This reflects the strength, coherence, and maturity of our legal, regulatory, and institutional frameworks. But in a world where financial crime is becoming more sophisticated and more global, standing still is not an option. If we do not keep improving, we will fall behind. This bill is therefore about staying ahead, closing gaps, strengthening enforcement, and ensuring that our laws keep pace with new emergent risks. Madam Speaker, compliance is not the destination, it is the foundation. The focus has now shifted to effectiveness, particularly under the FATF immediate outcomes. In this regard, areas such as supervision, beneficial ownership transparency, financial intelligence, and the confiscation of criminal assets remain key priorities for government. In addition, Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, we are facing threats that are evolving, transnational, and technologically enabled. Criminal actors and malign state-backed networks exploit opacity, legal ambiguity, and delay. They convert illicit proceeds through complex corporate and trust structures. They hide assets behind nominee arrangements. They exploit weaknesses in non-profit and cooperative sectors and benefit from slow or fragmented cross-agency responses. And to meet these challenges, we must modernize our statutory framework so that our supervisors, investigators, prosecutors, and courts can act swiftly, effectively, and fairly. Madam Speaker, it is precisely within this context that this bill must be understood. Following the completion of our second national risk assessment in 2025, Mauritius now benefits from a more refined and up-to-date understanding of money laundering and terrorism financing risk within our jurisdiction. The findings of this assessment have been instrumental in shaping the reforms before this House. This bill addresses the gaps identified while also aligning our framework with the latest amendments to the FATF recommendations. It has been developed through extensive consultation with all competent authorities, regulatory bodies, relevant ministries, key stakeholders, as well as international and regional partners, including a SAMLAG Secretariat. Madam Speaker, the bill strengthens our risk-based approach by introducing a more dynamic and continuous framework for risk identification and mitigation. It enables targeted and sector-specific assessments and ensures that critical risk information is disseminated effectively across all relevant authorities. A key feature of this bill is the full integration of proliferation financing risk within our legislative framework. It introduces a clear statutory definition, imposes obligations on reporting entities to assess and mitigate such risks, and empowers supervisory authorities to ensure proportionate compliance. Madam Speaker, the bill also significantly enhances our enforcement and asset recovery capabilities. It strengthens the powers of the Financial Crimes Commission. It introduces mechanisms for the temporary suspension of suspicious transactions. It reinforces provisions for the attachment and confiscation of illicit assets. The principle is simple and firm. Crime must not pay. In parallel, the bill advances transparency by strengthening beneficial ownership requirements and enhancing accountability within legal persons and arrangements, including trusts. It also introduces a more refined risk-based approach to the oversight of non-profit organizations, protecting legitimate activities while addressing potential vulnerabilities. Madam Speaker, an additional and forward-looking reform contained in this bill is the provision of the establishment of a centralized information management system. This system will consolidate concise, reliable, and timely data from all competent authorities into a single coordinated platform. The importance of such a mechanism cannot be overstated. Effective supervision, risk assessment, policy formulation, and enforcement all depend on the availability of accurate and accessible data. By enabling better data integration, analysis, and sharing, this measure will significantly enhance our ability to monitor trends, identify risks earlier, support evidence-based decision-making, and demonstrate effectiveness under international standards. Madam Speaker, the reforms extend further to supervisory and regulatory framework. They introduce group-wide supervision, enhance the powers of regulators, and strengthen coordination across institutions. They also address emergent risks, including those linked to virtual assets and new technologies, ensuring that our frameworks remain future-ready. Equally, the bill reinforces both domestic and international cooperation through improved information sharing mechanisms supported by clear safeguards to ensure confidentiality and proper use. Madam Speaker, allow me to introduce the bill clause by clause, explain what these amendments seek to achieve, and set out the public interest that underpins these changes. And I kindly ask the indulgence of the House, given that we are amending 24 existing legislations. I'll start with the Bank of Mauritius Act. The amendments in the Bank of Mauritius Act aim at clarifying the bank's confidentiality obligation so that where it is necessary to make a complaint, lodge a report, or provide information about a person involved or suspected to be involved in an offense. Secondly, introducing a transparent administrative sanctions process that requires written notification of the intended sanction. Thirdly, setting out the grounds and terms. And fourthly, affording the licensee a 21-day right to make written representations where sanctions may be imposed. Banking Act, including central bank provisions. The Banking Act is being amended in order to firstly clarify the definition of foreign exchange dealer in order to remove licensing and supervision ambiguities, extend AML-CFT obligations to explicitly encompass proliferation financing, and ensure new products, group programs, and customer due diligence measures reflect this obligation. And thirdly, strengthen confidentiality and information sharing provisions to permit both spontaneous and requested exchanges. Companies Act. The Companies Act is being amended to provide a more encompassing UBO definition which enhances corporate transparency, improves customer due diligence across reporting sectors, and materially assists law enforcement and regulatory tracing. Madam Speaker, Cooperatives Act. The Cooperative Act is being amended to empower the registrar to conduct outreach and training on AML-CFT obligations. and require cooperative societies and credit unions to maintain a register of beneficial owners subject to supervisory access with penalties for non-compliance. Courts Act. The Courts Act is being amended to expand the criteria for referral to the Financial Crimes Division to cover offences involving public officials, high-profile penetrators, foreign nationals, or where the offence is grave or complex. Require fair and timely determination of matters by providing for expeditious conduct of proceedings, DDI in diem, progression of the plea, and adjournments only when it is in the interest of justice. Madam Speaker, Declaration of Assets Act. The Declaration of Assets Act is being amended to firstly permit electronic submission of declarations, broaden definitions, for example, spouse and certain asset classes, and strengthen powers to request supporting information and documents. Secondly, introduce a narrowly framed voluntary disclosure relief for late filers who come forward before an investigation is underway, and increase penalties for deliberate non-compliance. Madam Speaker, the Environment Act. As environmental crimes can be lucrative and may generate proceeds that feed into broader money laundering schemes, the Environment Act is being amended to introduce an offence of ecocide for unlawful and wanton acts that cause severe, widespread, or longer-term environmental damage with proportionate fines and custodial penalties of up to 10 years, alongside non-criminal remedies such as restoration, compensation, and exclusion from public funding. Financial Crimes Commission Act. The Financial Crimes Commission Act is being amended to address operational gaps, improve clarity, and enhance effectiveness. The definition of property of corresponding value is being introduced in order to enable recovery where original proceeds of crime cannot be located, traced, dissipated, or held by bona fide third party. This significantly strengthens our asset recovery capability in line with international standards. The amendments also improve coordinations between enforcement agencies by removing rigid statutory thresholds for referrals between the Commission and the police. The provisions relating to unexplained wealth are also strengthened by broadening their scope to include residents and legal persons, and by introducing more flexible evidentiary mechanism to handle complex cases. Madam Speaker, Financial Intelligence and Anti-Money Laundering Act, FIAMLA. The FIAMLA is being amended to refine the definition of financial institution and expand transaction to cover professions and gambling, and add clear definitions for non-profit organization, proliferation financing, and virtual assets service providers. Amendments are also being proposed to require reporting persons to address PF risk, mandate a centralized information management system for AML, CFT, CPF data, introduce consolidated group supervision, improve domestic and international information sharing safeguards, and provide procedural fairness and appeal rights for administrative penalties, tighten customer due diligence for existing customers, and adjust sectoral reporting thresholds. Financial Reporting Act. The Financial Reporting Act is being amended to provide explicit powers to the Mauritius Institute of Professional Accountants to inspect its licenses, enable issuance of remedial directions with procedural safeguards, and allow compounding of offences with appropriate oversight and escalation to law enforcement agencies where compounding is declined. Madam Speaker, Financial Services Act. The Financial Services Act is being amended to introduce a register of domestic trusts and foreign trusts having at least one qualified trustee. Clarify that the Commission may facilitate or permit foreign counterparts to conduct group-level inquiries and extend supervisory information exchange powers with safeguard on dissemination. Madam Speaker, Gambling Regulatory Authority, Income Tax Act and the Mauritius Revenue Authority Amendment. The Gambling Regulatory Authority Act, the Income Tax Act and the Mauritius Revenue Authority Act are being amended to require beneficial ownership details at license application stage for gambling operators, introduce cash transaction limits, and enhance fiscal investigation powers with carefully circumscribed search and seizure provisions and appropriate safeguards. Madam Speaker, National Payment Systems Act. The National Payment Systems Act is being amended to clarify enforcement and due process by allowing operators, participants, and payment service providers to seek judicial review for administrative penalties and actions. Real Estate Agent Authority Act. The Real Estate Agent Authority Act is being amended to vest the authority with the responsibility of approving compliance officers in addition to MLROs and deputies, and formalizing information sharing arrangements with other bodies for the purpose of tightening AML-CFT oversight, improve interagency cooperation, and ensuring that transactional actors are properly regulated. Madam Speaker, Registration of Associations Act. The Registration of Associations Act is being amended to empower the registrar to collect fundraising, financial, programmatic data, enable risk-based inspection and information sharing, provide a right of judicial review against administrative sanctions, and record fundraising disbursement activity to enhance NPO transparency and TF risk mitigation. Madam Speaker, United Nations Financial Prohibitions, Arms Embargo and Travel Ban Sanctions Act. The United Nations Financial Provisions, Arms Embargo and Travel Ban Sanctions Act is being amended to provide for, firstly, definition of risk to be expanded to cover proliferation and proliferation financing, and secondly, the speeding up of UN sanction implementation and strengthen coordination. And finally, Madam Speaker, value-added tax. The value-added tax is being amended to secure interagency cooperation and preserving safeguards. Madam Speaker, if these amendments are enacted and effectively implemented, we can reasonably expect, firstly, a clear reinforcement in the effectiveness measures to prevent Mauritius being used as a conduit for illicit finance by closing identifiable legal gaps. Secondly, more rapid and effective investigations, better preservation of evidence, and timely asset recoveries. Thirdly, greater resilience of our financial sector and strengthened confidence among international partners and investors. Fourthly, enhanced transparency and accountability across corporate, cooperative, and public office contexts. And fifth, stronger compliance with FATF and related international standards protecting our market access and reputation. Madam Speaker, this bill addresses vulnerabilities identified in our national risk assessment and in international evaluations. It is urgent because criminals actors do not wait. It is measured because each enhancement is accompanied by safeguard and oversight. Our goal is not to punish legitimate business or hamstring legitimate commerce. Our goal is to deny criminals the tools to exploit our jurisdiction, to preserve investor confidence, and to protect citizens from the corrosive effect of illicit finance on public institutions. Madam Speaker, the amendments I present today are the product of careful diagnosis of real operational problems and of comparative international practice. They are designed to work together to make our supervisory regime clearer and more effective, to make prosecution and asset recovery practicable, prompt, and to ensure our legal framework remains responsive to emerging risks such as virtual assets and proliferation financing. At every stage, we have built in safeguards to protect procedural fairness and individual rights. I invite members of the Assembly to examine each amendment on its own merit, to engage constructively with the bill's provision, and to support this endeavor so that Mauritius remains a safe, credible, and resilient financial jurisdiction, one that protects its citizens, honors its international commitments, and attracts legitimate investment and commerce. Madam Speaker, we on our part are also investing significantly in capacity building to ensure that the successful implementation of the measures that I have just elaborated. Through training programs, outreach initiatives, and collaboration with international institutions and development partners, we are ensuring that both the public and private sectors remain equipped to respond effectively to evolving risk. This whole-of-system approach is critical to sustaining effectiveness. So, Madam Speaker, taken together, these reforms represent a decisive and strategic step forward. They move us beyond technical compliance toward demonstrable effectiveness. They strengthen our institutions, enhance transparency, and reinforce our ability to prevent and combat financial crime in all its forms. Above all, they reaffirm our commitment to maintaining Mauritius as a credible, resilient, and internationally respected financial center. Madam Speaker, the message we send today is clear. Mauritius will not be a weak link in the global financing system. We will be a jurisdiction of integrity, of substance, and of trust. Now, Madam Speaker, before concluding, let me make an important final point. I am conscious that whenever we bring forward legislations of this nature, there may be concerns from the industry. Some will say we are over-regulating. Others will argue that we are acting under external pressure, and some may worry about the burden on businesses. Coming myself from the private sector, I am very conscious of striking the right balance between compliance and an enabling business environment. So let me address this directly. First, this bill is not about over-regulation. It is about smart and targeted regulation. It is about focusing on real risk, not creating unnecessary obstacles for legitimate operators. Second, this is not about doing things for others. It is about acting in our own national interests. A strong AML-CFT framework protects Mauritius, our economy, our jobs, and our international standing. And third, Madam Speaker, the bill is designed to support, not stifle, genuine businesses. A clean and credible jurisdiction attracts more investment, lowers risk, and creates long-term opportunities for our people and our businesses. So, Madam Speaker, the choice before us is clear. We can either be reactive, waiting for the problems to arise, and then scrambling to respond in the future. Or we can take proactive, deliberate, and decisive steps to safeguard our health today. This bill chooses the path of responsibility, credibility, and confidence. It takes decisive action, and it sends a very clear and strong message. A clear message to investors that Mauritius is a strong, safe, and secure place to do business. And a clear message to those who would do our nation harm with dirty money or illegal finance. The message is stay away. You have no place in Mauritius. The Mauritian economy is an economy built on integrity, honesty, and the rule of law. An economy which is strong, stable, and secure. An economy where legitimate enterprises can thrive, not just survive. So delivering our wealth, our prosperity, and an improved quality of life. Madam Speaker, with that, I now commend the bill to the House.
Yes.